Hi, I'm Paul Brodie, and we are not in my shop today like usual. We are out at UFV. This is called the Bike Shop, and this is where I taught Frame Building 101 for 9.5 years. What we're going to do today is to align a frame. It's a Rocky Mountain hammer. That's our project for today. But as I mentioned, we're out at Frame Building 101. And in the summer of 2019, a young man enrolled in the class, and that was Mitch. He is the man behind the camera now. So there was a connection in Frame Building 101 in between what's happening in this YouTube channel. So thank you, Mitch. Let's go for a little walk around and I'll show you what we've got here, what's left. We've got some oxyacetylene bottles here, oxygen, acetylene. There's also argon. We used to have the 4 stands here. There was a brazing stand here, 1, 2, and then 3, and then 4. This was over there, so ignore this and these, because those weren't there. We had mats all over the floor. I had posters on the wall. I had my big sign up there. You can see the hook over there. And we've got the milling machine here. It's a lot like the one that I have in my shop. There's no vise because that was my vise, so it doesn't look like anybody's used it at all. We've got a new lathe. You can see we had some issues with students and the chuck key. So I made a sign pretty big. Well, first I made this sign and then it still happened. So that's when I put the caution all around it. Had some success with that, but usually someone would forget. And then we had a bunch of the frame fixtures and the small things on the wall over there. You can still see the outline. And this is the bench. This is the main bench with the vise. I think it's a 6-inch record, and this is where we would align the frame. So this is really solid. This bench is anchored to the wall here, so it doesn't move, and then there was all sorts of jigs and things underneath. Arbor press, that was used to ovalize tubing, things like that. Got a whole bunch of head tubes. All the tubing is over here. Had a problem with birds in here, so that's why we put the cardboard here. And there's a whole bunch of brazons here. There's dropouts, all different sizes of the bottom bracket shells for the fat bikes, 100 millimeters. So we had a pretty good stock here of brazons. Let's go around the other side and we'll see what's there. We've got a drill press, a belt sander. We've got a grinder here. This was mostly used to sharpen up the tungstens. And a bandsaw that was used to cut the tubing. And then round here is the TIG booth. It's kind of full of stuff, but this is where all the TIG welding happened. And then over in the corner is a mass of chrome moly. It's basically straight gauge tubing because sometimes we had a need for that. And we've got rolled tubing. We got all sorts of stuff here. So got lots of memories here. 9.5 years, that was kind of a long time. Anyway, we got a project. So I've got a beautiful frame here. I got this for free. It came from Harv at Life Cycles in Abbotsford. Thank you, Harv. I think he had it kicking around a long time, and so he donated it to Frame Building 101, and it sat around for quite a while. There's no threads. The boss is bent. So what I did back in my shop, I washed it with solvent. It was pretty dirty, and I faced and chased the bottom bracket, because when you align a frame, basically everything starts off the surfaces of the bottom bracket. So I wanted to make sure that those were flat. What we're going to do here, we're going to use a surface table. I'm going to align the frame on the surface table, and we'll see. I have no idea if it's in alignment or how far it's out. I haven't checked anything on it. All I've done is wash it and clean up the surfaces of the bottom bracket. So let's see what we do. I think the first thing we'll do is to take a vernier and just have a look and see if the down tube is more or less in the middle. I think that would be a good thing to do, just for our own reference. It's pretty darn close. It's not out by a mile or anything like that. So that's a good starting point. On a surface table, there's always something that holds the bottom bracket, and this is hardened steel. This is really solid. So the first thing as an observation is that this is smaller than the inside of the bottom bracket, so you can have it to one side or the other. I think it's important to have it into the middle. So that's where your eyeball comes in, micrometer. So, and then you crank it down. I've modified this tool. It used to have 3 Allen screws holding it in, but it was really hard if you had to move it up and down. You'd loosen them and then it would kind of jam. So I changed this around a bit and I made these knurled knobs in my lathe. So this goes on here like that, and you can you see how it's not centered? So the first thing we want to do is to center it. And then everything comes off this. And that looks good. The first thing I'm going to do is to check the seat tube. This here is so that after you've aligned the seat tube, you can move the frame over, and you can move these knurled knobs or discs so that they're on either side, and it holds the seat tube in place, and then you can move the down tube and align the head tube. So that's the first thing to do, is to see how we're doing on the seat tube here. So there's no space there, and there's no space there. So actually the seat tube is aligned quite well. That's good. So I'm going to move the frame over now, like that, and we're going to sandwich this just lightly. So that's going to hold it. There we go. So I can't move it up or down. Next thing we'll check is the down tube. Oh, okay. So there's an obvious gap here. There's about a, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch gap. So what we need to do is to pull up. So let's try that. I'm lifting the table actually, which is quite heavy. And it still has to come up more. I did bring something. I brought a car jack. I just had a feeling that I should maybe bring a car jack. It's got a rubber bit on the top. I use this in my shop quite a bit. So this will allow me to put more force than I can put on there. I should have brought the handle. I need to find a handle. And what I think I'll do, I'll take a measurement so that I know how much I'm going up. So I'm going, it goes up quite, so there, I'm at the 130 there. And we'll just go up incrementally. I think that's the best way to do it, rather than all at once. And still got a gap. So we did 130 last time. So why don't we do, let's go to 140. There we go. Got 140. And we still have a gap. Getting some torque on here now. So let's go 150. We'll bend it. So it's getting closer, but it's still out. It's chromoly, it's got a memory, right? So it wants to spring back. That's part of the nature of chromoly. So we're going to go to 160 this time. That's quite a bit of torque, isn't it? And there's 160. And it's still not straight. Oh, it came. Okay, so what holds this on to the surface table is a big bolt, and when we got here, I tightened this with my big wrench as much as I could, but it's apparently come loose. So I guess that's a little bit of the shortcoming of this design. That's what goes in. It's like it's cast. It's not machine or anything. It's just cast. So there. Let's try that. And the story with the surface table is that we went down to NABS, myself and the university, and the gentleman that had the booth right next to us, he was selling stuff, and he had surface tables and he had other tools as well, and frame jigs, I think, too. So in the course of conversation, I think the university was offered a deal. That's how we ended up with the surface table. And the surface table has been here maybe, while I was teaching, 5 or 6 years. And we'll get into that story in a little bit. Okay, so that didn't change anything. Look, I can put a ruler through there. We still have a pretty big gap. So 165 is right there. That's a long ways. There we go, 165. Okay, so it went a little too far there, which is fine, because that's the best way to align a frame, is to go a little bit too far and then go back to center. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a push. So we're tight there. Oh, okay, so that's good. We don't have paper going in either side, so that's good. Next stage is, we know the seat tube is level with the table. So now we put in a bar and we check on either side. That'll let us know if the head tube is in line with the seat tube. So if I twist that now, so that's pretty solid. Now we use this. We have a huge gap on top. And over here, we also have a huge gap on top. So in theory, this should be right in line because the down tube is aligned with the bottom bracket, so it's in the middle. And if I run my fingers over the down tube and the head tube, it's not like the head tube is off to one side, but this is showing that the down tube is too low, which doesn't really make any sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this so that this bar, head tube alignment bar, is in the middle, and then I'll check the other side. And then we'll know if the head tube is in line with the seat tube. Let's try that. Okay, so that's good. Now we come over here. So that's tight. Oh, we've got quite a gap under here. So what that means is that I have to pull the head tube this way. And that's the main reason I brought this out, because I thought if I have to put leverage on one of these, I want it supported under here. So let's do that. There you go. I've got some support. And now, there we go. Okay, that's good. And then over here, oh, okay. So that means that the head tube is now in line with the seat tube. So there's one more thing we can do on the surface table, and that's to check how the rear end is doing, how the dropouts are. See these here? See these spaces here? I think we've got probably 126, 130, 135. Let's just check, because we want the 135. That is, if you can see that, that is 135. All right, so what this shows is that that has to go down, and so does that, because it's out of alignment. Okay, so that's good. So this frame is aligned, right? Let's check. What we're going to do now is to flip it over, because if it works on one side, then it should work on the other side, right? That's what we wanted. Now we'll go to the seat tube. Okay, so we flipped the frame over. Can you see how there's a huge gap here now? That's not very good. And let's go up here. So we got a gap. We got a gap here again. So I flipped the frame over and it should be the same, but it's not. So when we got this surface table, that is exactly what I did. I aligned the frame on one side and I flipped it over and it's out. So I phoned up the person who sold the university this surface table and I explained to him, and he says, oh no, he says, you never flip the frame around. It always goes onto the surface table the same way it goes onto the jig. And I said, well, how do you double check it? He says, no, you always put it on the surface table one way. That's what you do. And to me, that made absolutely no sense at all, because in the system that I use, I double check everything. That's how my system works. So we talked on the phone for half an hour and I could see that I wasn't getting anywhere. So I'm not a fan of big surface tables. So why don't we align the frame using the system that I use, and you decide what's simpler. This surface table has been out here while I was teaching for 5 or 6 years, and I would show students how to align on the surface table, and then I would show them my system. So there had to be probably 80 or 100 students that came through when this table was here. And do you know how many students use the surface table to align their frames? Not one. Not even one student used the surface table. They all use my method because I think it's easier and faster. So I'll show you my method. If you've been watching our series, you know that I made a fancy alignment gauge, but I didn't always have this. And what I want to show you is that basically we used this one for over 30 years, and this one works fine. And look how simple it is. It's just a piece of 1/8" flat bar. There's a pointer welded on a piece of flat steel. It got machined so that it's perfectly flat, and it works fine. So I'll use this for the down tube. So let's just have a look and see how straight this is now. So what I do is I just rest it on the wooden table. What I'm doing, I got one hand on each side, so I'm putting force onto the bottom bracket shell. And I move it back and forth until it just almost touches or touches. Can you see that? See how close it is? And I go over center. And the bottom bracket's nice and flat. And then I flip it over. And it's slightly out. It needs to get pulled to the left. Can you see that? Slightly out. So let's align it. Let's do that. So I put in my bottom bracket shells. Hold it in the vise. You have to be careful in the vise, because if you're not careful, you can damage a frame. Aligning a frame, I used to tell my students, is the 2 F's. It's force and finesse. And maybe it seems like they're opposite, but not really, because you need force to move the frame, but where the finesse comes in is that you incrementally pull pull the frame. So I put my foot up here and I got my knee on here. So now, because if I'm out here, I can't tell how much force I'm putting on the frame. If I use my knee and my shoulder muscles and my back muscles, I get a real sense of how hard I'm pulling the frame. So we'll give it a little pull. Okay, that pulled it just a little bit. You saw it bend a little bit. And the finesse comes in is that if I need to pull it again, I add 10%. I don't add 50% or more, just incrementally. So we had to pull it left. And it's very, very close. Okay, so I need to pull it again because it didn't move enough. I've got to pull it more. And this is where the experience comes in a bit because I have a sense of how hard to pull. So there we go. See that little bit of space there? And we got a little bit of space there. So that down tube is aligned. So now we'll check the seat tube. I'm gonna use my fancy one. It's not gonna make it any better. So there, we're very, very close. And now we'll flip it over. Okay, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. So we have aligned the down tube and the seat tube. So now we have to check the head tube with the seat tube. And that's where my little surface table comes in. Let's go check it. I put this in like that. No screwing around. You see how this, can you see that? See how that matches there? And then I lock this. Move the handles around here. And when I spread the handles apart, it locks. That is solid. So this is my small surface table. Well, it's the university's, but at home I have one identical. And this table, you can basically make it yourself. It costs thousands of dollars less than this one. Literally thousands of dollars. Okay, so even though I aligned the head tube on this big surface table, can you see here how it's out? See that? I trust this more than that. I really do. So what we have to do now is to bend this down. And that's what the hooks are for here. You see these hooks? And this little ledge got added later because frames got longer. So now I put a couple of these under the bottom bracket shell. And then now I'm going to press down. I'm going to put a bit of force on that. Okay. So I put force on there, but we still have a gap. I have to be careful here. See how the seat tube is overlised? I have to make sure that I'm off the overlised part here. If I put it down here, I'd get a false reading. So you always have to watch out if there's a bit of overlisation going on. So we still have a little problem here. I'm about 180 pounds, but I can only put so much weight on this. So what I've got here is a little bit of a Cheetah bar, and it slides into the seat tube. So what you don't want to do is to put it in a little ways and then put all your weight on that, because you could cause a problem in here. You want to put it in at least a certain amount of ways, and then I'm using a small part of it here. And you can bounce a bit too. So that's got my feet off the ground. This is not oversized tubing at all, but it shows you that it's pretty tough stuff, this chromoly. And so I'm still not getting it aligned, even though on the big surface table, I checked it and it was aligned, but with the big surface table, it came with this bar. There's two different sizes. This is a little bit of a taper, and I think this is the smaller size. So there we go. And the seat stay, actually, I heard it just touched the table very, very slightly. Look at that. So this frame, head tube, seat tube, it was definitely out. So I'm gonna have to put even more force on that. I have a theory, and I'll voice it. I know there's a lot of frame builders that use a big surface table, and they probably only check it on one side. I have a suspicion that maybe quite a few frames aren't that well aligned. That's my suspicion. But a frame really has to be out of alignment quite a bit, and then you can't ride no hands. So if it's out of alignment a little bit, maybe it's not a big deal, but I'm just fussy. I'm a fussy frame builder. Okay, we're going to put even more force on here now. I'm going to hold it out here more, because if something happens there, I don't really mind. See it touching the table? And if this doesn't make it straight, then I add another spacer under here. That's the methodology. You add spacers at that point. Okay, very close, but still needs a bit more. Okay, so I've got a 1/4 inch flat steel, and I'm adding that. And so what's gonna happen is that when I'm gonna touch, that's a pretty big space, isn't it? That's like 3 fingers. That's how much I'm gonna bend the frame to try and make it straight. There you go, you heard it touch. You know, if this Rocky Mountain was perfectly straight, we wouldn't have much of a video, would we? Okay, so this is, what's happened here now is that I've gone a little bit over center. Can you see there's a little bit of a gap there? So that's actually good, because now I put it under that hook, and I put it like this, and I'm just gonna give a little push, okay? That's all. Because it's got that thing called memory. Look at that. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So now we're gonna align the dropouts. Okay, we're heading towards the last part of alignment, and that is the dropouts. And so the axle on this bike is 135. So we want to space it to 136. So if it ever moved in a touch, the wheel would still slide right in. What we want is the dropouts to be in the center of the seat tube and the head tube. So that's where this comes in. This is an alignment stick, and I made this in 1985. It's pretty simple. It's a piece of aluminum. It's tubing with an insert in the end. This is made out of stainless, doesn't have to be, but there's an Allen screw, and you see how I can move that and it stays where it is. You see that? So what I do, I hold it like so. I've got my hand about halfway in between, and then I have to rotate it so that I know I'm going through the full. Hear it hit? It's just touching. Now we check the other side. Oh, and we just aligned that on the big table. We had it right. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the big surface table and how I align a frame. So if you're getting into frame building, it's your choice. You can spend a lot of money on a big surface table. It looks really impressive, but making up a few simple hand tools, I think you get a frame which is aligned better. Okay, so we need to check. Well, we're at about 140. So we need to come in a little bit. Both sides have to move over a little bit. So you just give it a little nudge. Oops. So we're at like 138. Just touching. And that one's still close. So, you know, sometimes these are hard to move if you got a really thick stay, a strong stay. So if you put a rag here, this just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more controllable. We're about 140 still, but we got to come to the middle. See the space there? We got to come in a little bit. And it comes back pretty easy. Oops, came back quite a bit. We're at 136. So on the surface table, on the big surface table, that's basically all we can do. But I'm going to show you there's some extra steps. I've got a couple other tools, I'll grab them. What this is my, it's even got a label, seat stay fixture. And this is what I use for when I tack on the seat stays. This holds the dropouts, and this fits up around the top of the seat too. So, but it's also used as an alignment tool. So I put this in. Can you see that there? It's close. It's a little bit on the left. It's a little bit towards the left, but not bad. So what I could do, I won't do it now, I could take a round file and I could file up just a touch, and that will get the wheel back into the middle, but I won't do that now. And then the second thing, which you can't do on a big surface table, I got the Campy tools. These are our dropout tools. They go in like that. And it tells you if the faces are parallel with each other. Ooh, look at that. Can you see how it's out? It's out a mile. These ought to be in line with each other. So I'll show you how I do this. This one has to go that way. So I put the handle like that, because now, see what I'm doing? I pull this way and I push this way. Watch it bend. There we go. And if you look from this view, can you see how there's a gap under the bottom? So I need to push this up. I'm bending the dropouts, and it's pretty close. And when you hold them together, they should be very, very close. So that frame is aligned. I think I've told you all I know about alignment right now, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This probably opens up a whole can of worms on alignment in the frame building community, but that's okay. If you like it, please give us a thumbs up, please subscribe. We got merchandise for sale, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and we both like coffee. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. See you next week. That's a real Dynafile, the real thing. That's how you change the belts. Like that, and then you flip the cover back over. It's a nice tool, really nice. Belongs to the university.